Hello, fellow innovators. This is Patrick Emmons.
And this is Shelli Nelson.
Welcome to the Innovation and the Digital Enterprise Podcast, where we interview successful visionaries and leaders, giving you an insight into how they drive and support innovation within their organizations. Today, we're welcoming Eric Rempel to the show. Eric is Redwood Logistics Chief Innovation Officer. As CIO, he is focused on developing diverse solutions and services for the company's clients. Prior to becoming CIO in 2017, Eric served as Redwood's Chief Technology Officer, where he played a vital role in the creation of what would become one of Redwood's flagship products, its proprietary transportation management system that combines historical analytics, market data, and operational best practices. And before joining Redwood Logistics, Eric founded 3P Logic in 2009, which is known today as Redwood Supply Chain Solutions. From 2010 to 2015, under Eric's leadership, Redwood SCS grew exponentially with over 8,000% advancement. The company's achievement in developing customer-facing solutions and supply chain technology was recognized when Redwood earned a number 3 rating on Crane's Fast 50 list for 2016. Eric is a thought leader and national speaker on advanced technologies such as API-led architecture, cloud computing, supply chain integration and automation, big data analytics, and emerging technologies. He holds a BS in computer engineering and mathematics from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign.
Welcome to the show, Eric.
Hey, Shelli and Patrick. Thank you for having me.
Eric, if you don't mind, can you share with our listeners a little bit more about Redwood Logistics?
Yeah, absolutely. So Redwood is now a 20-year-old company that lives at the intersection of logistics and technology. We got our start as a traditional freight brokerage, of which there's several great competitors in the Chicago area, where we buy and sell capacity in the marketplace for shippers looking to move their freight. But we've evolved over the years to really leverage data and technology to not only transform how we run as a business, but also we built out a platform as a service, as an integration platform for our customers to give them a way to digitally transform their supply chains and find a lot of value, whether it's on our tech side or on our logistics side. And we kind of bridge that gap and aim to give our customers the best of both worlds.
One of the things that I always hear about Redwood, people who work there currently, people who work with you, people who have left and moved on, is something that the culture at Redwood is something a little bit unique. Not just specifically for the industry that you live in, but overall, there's a real sense of purpose, but at the same time, joy. A lot of people, they're excited to be there. What are some of the things that, from an innovation standpoint, the culture's got to be a critical element of that, of creating an environment where experimentation exists. What are some of the things that you've seen that have been, best practices from your experience in developing that type of culture?
There's 2 ways to look at it. I think it's, fair for every business to look at this pre-pandemic and hopefully soon post-pandemic or whatever the new future holds. But, it's a world where we believe in each other, we're honest with each other. You have an ability to make mistakes, but, we're still 90% remote. We've done great remotely, and now it's a matter of how do we take what was and still is a culture of teamwork, of respect, of, giving 110%, of having fun, and bringing that back into this hybrid world of work from home. And, as, hopefully, the vaccines take hold and people can make it back in, a way to, continue that in the office and whatever the new normal will be. So, having said that part, and that's still a journey that we're going down as I would argue almost every business out there, we want to make sure that we keep what we had before, which is accountability and the ability to, learn and make mistakes. There's a great book by Daniel Pink called Drive, where he talks about, the 3 factors towards, fulfillment in the workplace are mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And mastery is, the Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000 hour rule. Autonomy is, here's clear instructions on what you're doing and you're left alone to get it done. And then purpose, which is, why am I doing this, right? Is it for profit? Is it for something bigger? Is it for my family? But as people find that, I think, our culture really lends itself well towards enabling people to find their purpose and their mission as they, either come into work or log on every day.
Does that make it difficult to hire, Eric?
I don't know that it does, because that excitement level is pervasive in the hiring process, right? And we're looking for that excitement. We're looking for folks who are eager to, learn something new or extend upon the skills that they already know and bring it to the company, and have that attitude of finding a way, and really when we do interview, that's what we're looking for, which is, can you self-start? Can you, handle, challenges on your own? Can you communicate with your peers? And I think now more than ever, that is the important characteristic of what we're looking for in people. So I'd argue that, it's only as difficult as the quality of candidates who want to live in a culture where, find a way is an unwritten rule within Redwood.
The autonomy part of that with Daniel Pink's book, and to Shelli's point, finding people who can live in the opaque, I think is a challenge. And I think it's getting harder, just because I do think these are personality traits, but also experience traits of like being put in situations where mom and dad didn't come fix it. And I mean that not just in a mom and dad sense, but in a proverbial sense of like, I throw up my hands and this is not what I'm paid for. So is there things that you're doing when you're vetting candidates to find people who are comfortable being uncomfortable? Because that's part of what you're talking about is, in the military, they use the term the officer's intent, right? Like what is it that you need done, not how to do it. And then to find people who enjoy that autonomy, that individual accountability. Is it something that you do during the interviewing process that you think helps suss that out or identify it as one of your, because it seems like that would be a very big core value for your group.
Yeah. I think that what we really aim to do is, we have a wide range of skill sets across, our team, and, depending on the role, who interviews a potential candidate. But, personally, I know that, one thing is we not in a mean way, right? But we try to scare people off, because the reality is, you have to be a self-starter. You have to, know what's right. You need to know how to manage not only downward, but also upward to communicate when you don't feel that you're getting the information you need to successfully complete the mission. And so, finding that balance, I'd argue, and what we look for is that combination of, get it done attitude with, respect for, making sure that we're all rowing the same direction in the boat. A lot of people can feel, and these analogies are overused, but, a lot of people can feel that, they're accomplishing something simply because they're rowing, not realizing they're going in the wrong direction. So I think that, being a candidate that is looking to say, like, I want to listen more than I talk, but at the same time, when I need to talk, I can effectively communicate what needs to happen when I see something, potentially going in that wrong direction. So to answer your question directly, what do we do? I think we just try to be human in the interview process and not go through, the standard wire manhole covers round questions and things like that, but more of the, hey, things will get real like they do in the real world. And how do you find yourself able to communicate when things are rough? And, and sometimes people struggle when things are good too. They feel like, what do? I feel not challenged, or I feel worried when I'm not putting out fires. Well, that's a good thing, and finding that kind of balance in your life as well. So that's really what we're trying to do, is just look at people as humans and say, how can he or she really find comfort in communicating what they're seeing.
That's really interesting, because Patrick and I recently had the CEO from 1871 on the podcast, and she said one of the questions that she likes to ask candidates is, do you consider yourself lucky? And that really goes to show, do you credit everything that you've done to kind of your own, owning your own destiny? Or have you had mentors? Have you had people that have helped you be successful along the way?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. I mean, I'm thinking about that right now in my head and how I'd answer it. And I always like to think that I'm very lucky from my background and my parents immigrating to this country and, having insane amount of luck that I wasn't born in the Soviet Union, and from that part, it's totally true. And I think it's just that balance of, giving it your all. And no matter what you do, when you have luck knocking at your door, right, you still have to work hard to make use of it.
I do think that's a profound question in a couple of ways. One, do you appreciate what you have as part of that question, right? Like, or do you see the value, right? Or are you always kind of looking at what you're not getting?
Yeah, I think that's the struggle, right? That's the what do the Stoics say? I want what I have, right? And finding that as an anchor for some peace in your life. But I think I've gone a little deep on us here today.
I actually, I think that's what we're here for.
Yeah, fair enough.
Our job is to change perspectives, right? To give people a different insight. You've accomplished a lot, and people want to know, right? Like, how do you see things, especially as a chief innovation officer? It's there's a natural contrarian vision that's required, right? We've talked about this a couple of times, in that, tell me what isn't going to work. You mentioned the Stoics, and the obstacle is the way is a great book for people who want to get an understanding of, like, if you can keep your wits when everyone else loses theirs, and to understand to be a contrarian. It doesn't mean you have to always be contrarian, but you have to be a contrarian, right? Of, like, what's everybody else doing, and I'm going to look at the other way. So I do think some of that's, the contrarian viewpoint is a big part of, like, your DNA. And so one of the phrases you use, and I think you've credited a mentor, is like, don't drink the wine before it's time. And so explain that philosophy, and how, timing. Timing is always a critical component, especially in strategy. And then the contrarian view, and how all that kind of plays together for you.
Yeah, I mean, right, that's the story of the innovator's life, right? Which is, you can see, the forest is right in front of you. And then, just listening to people's problems, you're like, oh, you need to go 2 miles north, 1 mile left. There's going to be a pond, right? And then on the other side is utopia. And everyone looks at you like you're a lunatic, which, to some degree you are. But, I think that the wine before its time analogy has held true. My career here at Redwood for 17 years is, we've had answers, and some of my other partners and I have seen where we believe the industry is going, what people want to do with data, to be specific, right? How networks can combine to create, hubs of value for organizations, how data can be shared, but wine before its time. And so, trying to find ways, whether it's the market isn't ready for it, or we don't have an execution plan, or we don't have, the technology ready yet. But, the feeling of that is, you can completely see that, electric cars are the future, and they have this ability to drive themselves, and they can become robo-taxis. And you see this vision so clearly of what the world can look like. And then you pitch it to your audience, who, is accountable for either giving you money, for building it, or as revenue. And they're like, what's electricity? Right. And so, you're like, oh, darn it. I went too far. Right. And so you thought it was a moonshot, and you aimed for Pluto. So, that is something that just over time, it's, the curbing of your enthusiasm to say, all right, have I socialized this enough to, to grandma and to others who, don't speak my industry, don't speak the language of tech. And then, let's assume that you believe it is the right thing to do. And the next step is, well, you're likely doing something that hasn't been done before, at least not the way in which that you intend to use it for your organization or whatever you're trying to build. And then you have to figure out, well, how do I do this, right? And forgetting things like, agile methodologies and all that, those great things. When you know where you're going, it's that little bit of, pushing others to see a vision and setting that vision, so that, everyone, going back to rowing, right? Everyone knows that we're generally going north, and you set some guiding principles, even though you don't exactly know how you're going to get there. But back to, purpose, right? You give people purpose and clarity as to what we're doing and why we're doing it, even if they can't see the thing that we're trying to build. And that's a really tough balance, right? Because you're evangelizing, you're motivating, you're talking people off of ledges, and sometimes you're eating your hat, right? Sometimes you pitch things and you're just like, no one got it, and that's okay. And it's led to, several stressful moments in my career where I've seen things as clearly as, as water, and, others didn't feel that it was a time, and you have to respect them, because if you're constantly going to push and never let back, well, you're going to alienate yourself as well. So it's this dance between innovation and, psychology and camaraderie. And then, when you feel that balance, that everyone's ready for it, that's when you strike, and you strike fast, because that window of opportunity closes pretty quickly.
How long did it take for you to get that balance?
I'm still seeking it. I mean, it's just getting better, but I'm always on the journey, but I'm never at the destination, because every time, there's a saying I have with a few of my coworkers, right, that we should write a book called, pardon my French, how to get shit done when you don't know what you're doing. And, it's really this, the journey always gets clearer. You just never arrive at a destination.
I think that concept of like, when you look back on it, it looks like there was a plan, right? It's like, it looks like I knew what I was doing there. It
Wink,
was
wink, not
the seat of my
not.
pants, right? And and I think there's a little bit of like hero worship that goes into some of these stories of like, we saw this and we knew that. And it's like, no, you didn't.
No. You know a lot of things. What is, pain points, right? And can you take, a giant Venn diagram of all these different pain points and then be like, we should invest our time and energy and money into this region of these pain points, right? And then as you do it, you discover something else new. And that's a really hard part about innovation is, you have an answer that is a blanket statement answer to what you're doing. But as soon as you open up the hood to whatever you're building, right, there's all these other moving pieces that require just as much attention, or, the whole thing could fail. So I think being honest about, not just to yourself, but to your peers, that like, hey, we know, Pareto's principle always holds true, right? We know the 80%, we know the 20% that gives us 80% of the value. But, there's going to be the flip side of that, which is, 20% of where we're going might take 80% of our time. And that law is, obviously, pervasive everywhere, but it's something I've learned to live by and trust it, because it's never not been true.
It's interesting you say that, because we're implementing 80/20 in our business, and our CEO just had us read a book called The One Thing. I don't know if you've read it.
That book starts with my favorite quote of all time in a Russian proverb that says, he who chases two rabbits catches none. And I think that book is fantastic in what they've done with it, right? Which is like, find that one thing that makes everything else easier or unnecessary. And it has been a guidepost to how I've been trying to organize myself over the last several years. And like, as much as I've read that book several times, and each time, you learn something new. It's just like a treasure trove of how to look at problems differently.
So you touched on the book that you guys would like to write about how to get
better title
done, right? Hey, I'm all for it, but I'll tell you some of my book titles later. Really not appropriate.
We have a forward by Rodney Dangerfield.
Exactly. Is he still alive? I hope so.
I don't think so.
Yeah, probably not. So one of the things, in that space where you're figuring it out, and I think this is part of the challenge with innovation is, you're not sure. You've got the pain points. You've done the one thing mentality of like, what is that one thing we've got to do? So what is it? How do you set a vision, right? Because to give the autonomy to empower people, you've got to set a vision, right? Where are we going? When do we think we might get there? What are those milestones we're looking for? What is it? How do you do that? Set that vision? Because I think for you, it's a natural thing. I think you can do that. How can like our listeners learn, what are some of the things that you do that kind of frees your mind from the day-to-day, the crisis du jour, the tedium that helps you set that vision when clearly nobody really knows exactly what's going to happen?
Yeah, that question had a lot of good points to it. I wish I wrote it down, but you started with saying when you're not sure, right? And being honest to yourself that you have blind spots, and honoring the fact that a very valid answer to most questions is I'm not sure, and let me rephrase it. The reason I'm saying that is because that's when you have to believe in your partners and the people that work around you. Like, I'm just a mad scientist here at Redwood that does, wacky things with technology and process and things like that, right? But more importantly is there's awesome people around me that see my blind spots. And, they see the market in a different way. They see our customers in a different way. And listening to their dissent and listening to where they think you're full of it or where you're spot on, right, is sometimes you have to take that gospel when you trust those people, in a way that maybe makes you feel uncomfortable, but you know that they represent a point of view that's different than yours and maybe even more important. So going back to your question, like when you're not sure, how do you get it done? I'm going to make this up on the spot here, but I think the first thing is to yourself be confident that you've seen the problem enough times, back to mastery and 10,000 hours and knowing the problem, right? Like you can feel the problem pretty darn well, but then, when you think you have a solution, start evangelizing it without asking for budget, without asking or saying that this is where we're going to go, but pitching it to customers, getting their feedback, being like, if we had a solution that could weave your, supply chain systems together, would that be helpful? Or, if we had a way to, get you lunch automatically when we thought you were hungry, right? Like they see what people think, right? Because you might think that's a great idea. And they're like, well, no, because it doesn't know what I want, right? And you're like, oh, well, that was a silly idea. And so listening to others over and over, you do it enough, right? Back to more mastery around it, the answer naturally floats to the top. And you have to believe in the process of evangelizing, socializing, letting others evangelize on your behalf, that they get it, that they see it. And in fact, we're doing that now within the business. We're pushing a new strategy to kind of reimagine our market positioning here around our technology and our logistics capabilities. And I've been working on it with some of our leadership here and the rest of the organization for several months now, probably since December. And it's just constantly evolving, because as we try it out on different segments of the business and starting to try it out externally, we're getting that feedback that sometimes might hurt your ego, but in the end, you're going to have a larger base of people with whom that message resonates. And, I think, so going back to the I'm not sure part, right? Check your ego at the beginning and listen to what other people say, which can be tough for an innovator, right? You love tinkering in the lab and think you have all the answers, but it's bigger than you.
It's a great point. And that humility, I think some of it comes with age. I think we talked about this before as well, where it's like there used to be a lot of pride or I don't know, conceit almost of like, no, I've got the answer, where now it's like, I just want to get it right, and to your point of like, I'm going to road test the hell out of all of these ideas, right? I'm going to start. My father's argumenting style is fantastic in that, like, he started with just arguing in the Emmons family's an art form, right? We're Irish Catholic. My dad's from Queens. You should see Holidays. It's frictionful, right? But like learning how to argue where you put yourself outside of the castle, you've got to fight your way through the moat, into the castle, up the stairs, and then you might be right. As opposed to I start with the idea that I'm in the castle and you have to fight your way in, and taking that, again, contrarian perspective of like, I'm going to assume I'm wrong and I need to find out where. And these friends that I have that I trust with my ego and, being vulnerable to them and letting them know. What I found really interesting in addition is that idea of like, I think far often too many people think that leaders have to have the answers, right? And that to be a good leader, I have to have all the answers, and that I'm not open to other people's ideas, and that I have to shout them down because I have the answer. And I, with the grace of age, and the folly of that strategy. But like how you bring that up, I think it's tremendous, of like starting out with, I'm not the keeper of the truth here, right?
Yeah. And neither is our CEO, and neither is our, equity partners, right? Like we're all just humans at the end of the day that, as variables present itself, we aim to make the best decisions. But I can't tell you how many times over the years, someone has just told me, well, just tell me, like, what is it, that we're marching towards, or where we're going, or where we're going from, and I think to your point, it comes with age. Earlier in my career, I think I tried too hard to give answers where I thought it's what people wanted to hear. And as I got older, I realized, the best answer is I don't know, or, you said it earlier, I'm not sure, right? But I do know that it's north, right? And I do know, nothing more than my gut, or, a highly educated gut, right? Or something of that nature, but like, it's definitely north. But it might not be, but it probably definitely is, right? And so
That's the assumption we're working on. Yeah.
that's the
It's north.
assumption we're working on. And if
Right.
we have to pivot, we're going to pivot. But can we all row north together for now? And if it changes, we'll disseminate that information so that we change course. And that's tough because, I think everyone in their right is fighting their amygdala, right? We've got these super smart, prefrontal cortexes that have evolved to give us answers and innovations and, ideas around what could be. And then, we've got, our caveman brains that are, telling us to fight and panic and worry and have feelings about stuff. And, those guys can become dangerous. So, the more, I think it's an age thing, I think it's a discipline thing to some extent, but yeah, I agree. If you can find a way to lead with ambiguity, you'll get pretty far.
That's awesome. One of the things I think you guys differentiate on in a lot of ways, but one specifically, I think, your organization really engages a lot of the non-tech folks in a lot of the technical solutions, right? So empowering people who know the business, understand the relationships, the nuances, right? And you engage them in a way that they're helping not just be a subject matter expert, but actually helping to develop solutions. I think our listeners would love to hear more about that, considering the constraints that we have right now with technical resources who have some of these additional cultural characteristics. So how do you empower those folks?
Yeah, I mean, that's been my MO really here for the second half of my career, right? Like the first half was building our internal technology and what powers the organization. And, we've obviously grown since then and done some acquisitions and brought in new tech, right? So that chapter of my life is a bit behind me in a great way. We've brought on amazing people who are smarter than me at this stuff. But on this side of aiming or arming the non-tech staff, you mentioned earlier that 8,000% growth and what was happening. Well, what we were doing is we were onboarding, shippers, right? Back to some logistics talk for a second. We were enabling shippers with SaaS-based technology to automate and streamline how they, move their goods across the country, right? So it deals with everything. It deals with everything for them automatically, or as much as we can automate. And the integration patterns, the technical setup, the connectivity between systems started becoming a bottleneck. And it was a bottleneck to that hyper growth, right? As we were onboarding customers to manage their freight or give them technology, was how do we connect their systems to our systems fast enough every single time we land a new customer? And so we invested in IT over and over, and more people and, more code. And, and the problem wasn't the code or writing it. The problem was we have people who speak logistics that then talk to our people who speak logistics, that then get requirements where the use cases are different every single time because our industry is so fragmented. And they end up with, something that is, not all the way there. And this is where 80/20 doesn't work, because a bad integration that doesn't work just doesn't work. It's binary. So what we've been trying to do really since 2012, almost 9 years now, is let logistics people do full end-to-end integrations where with our drag and drop platform, they create API pipelines, they create data transformations, they weave how systems interop together with event-based architecture, with good SDLC built in, automatic versioning of everything, right? Total visibility to all transactions. And they don't know how to write any code, right? They know logistics. And it does all of that for them without even saying any of those words, right? And auto scaling and all that kind of stuff. It's all just done when they drag and drop. And what that's enabled us to do and helped us with our growth trajectory is let people who haven't traditionally been able to deliver technical solutions start delivering it and start making, innovative changes for our customers where every single integration is different. Every solution is different, and they're creating massive value for these companies' logistics networks without being technical and without having to look bad because, we give it to IT and they miss the requirement. So I guess, it's almost the democratization of innovation, right? Where you can let people who speak the language of that business deliver, hyper powerful tech tools without understanding what they're even delivering under the hood. And then customers are happy, and then they're happy because they're finding purpose and delivering things that they traditionally couldn't, right? And that's purposeful, and that's fun.
Having seen a lot of the low code platforms, there's way more missteps, mistakes, bad implementations than there were successful ones from my experience, right? Mathematically, I can't say I know that for a fact.
There's a rule there somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen it enough to say, right? Starting with access databases with an enormous form with 42 different buttons that nobody knows what it does, right? So, dating myself a little bit there, maybe I built a few. So what?
You're in good company.
So what do you think is some of the things that you're doing that's making this successful that other people aren't doing? What do you think is the key to success for you to be able to leverage these types of philosophies and technologies to enable these folks? What is it? What's some of the magic?
Well, I think one of them is, the best software is built by companies that use it themselves. Redwood is the biggest customer of this platform. And before that, right, when we started 3P Logic and we were doing these integrations, we were the customer. We were the pain point. We went through other integration platforms. We went through 3 to be specific, and 2 other MFT solutions, plus like 3 other homegrown attempts right before we did this one. So the short answer is a lot of failures and learned lessons. It's, innovation isn't, sitting in a garage and having that aha moment and then you build Doc's DeLorean and, you're going back to the future. It's a feeling that pain over and over and over and over and over again. And then just saying like, well, I need a solution that eliminates all of these pain points. We didn't even have a name for Redwood Connect before we built it. We called it the I don't know machine, right? Because what are our customers going to send us? I don't know. What do we need to do with it? I don't know. What protocol? I don't know. What frequency? I don't know. How does it scale? I don't know, right? And so we're like, okay, we need to answer all of those problems. And we did, but we wouldn't have gone there had we not hit so many roadblocks and hit so many failures along the way. It's just, I think, I'll just make a blanket statement that I'm sure someone will yell at me about at some point listening to this, but I don't think you can be a good innovator without failing. I just don't.
No, I don't think that's a blanket statement. I think that's a truism, right? Every great innovator, entrepreneur I've ever met, one gentleman, his story always stuck with me. Somebody asked, how were you able to create 3 successful businesses? He said, I started 7.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's almost like the one-hit wonders of music, right? Like it's almost a curse if you get it right the first time, right? With Jordan saying like, if we didn't lose to the Pistons so often, we wouldn't have won 6, right? Like there's something about pardon my French, the ass kicking that's required. It's required. It's cost entry, right?
It is. It builds up your psychological immune system,
And I think to your point on the low code, I think there's a lack of commitment of like, we think this is going to be so easy that if it doesn't work the first time, we're going to kind of quit on it. Right. Because I do think that's also what I've seen where it's not approaching it as if it's a real product in the first place, but then also not persisting once you realize it ain't free. Right. It's low code. Right. But it's not zero either. It's still going to take effort. You still have to put a lot of effort into it. You got to put a lot of thinking into it, planning.
Yeah. Well, the thinking and planning and designing, 100%, right? Like you start in Lucidchart and you create some good workflows and you think about what you're going to do right before you do it, right? Measure twice, cut once. But we really, I'd say like 80 to 90% of our engagements are 0 code. And we've gotten to that point because, you mentioned something in your previous comment and it reminded me, which is not only did my team and I fail many times in getting to the point where we knew what we wanted to build, but we wanted to allow this other team that leverages the software to fail quickly and move forward very easily, where they build something, press play, nope, not good, press play, nope, not good, press play. There it is, right? And no compiling, none of that, right? Like you just try it out and all of a sudden you get it to work, because it's a tinkering machine, right? And then it scales automatically once the traffic starts hitting, right? And so that part of letting people fail as part of the design process, I wasn't intending on talking about it, but I think your point is very strong in that, the failure permeates through, and we have a platform meant for trial and error to get to that optimal solution as quickly as possible.
Yeah, a good friend of Shelli and mine, a gentleman by the name of Jim Vasilopoulos. I think to your point of a culture, why you do things, the experimentation, there's a risk reward quotient in every organization. I think the least experimental, the least innovative are the ones who are trying to reduce risk to the point you've risked all reward as well. Right. And that's something that Jim says all the time. And I always think it's fantastic to remember is if you're driving to zero risk, you're driving to zero reward. And I think that is the stasis. We find a lot of organizations who get past that part of their life cycle where they're profitable and successful and they're growing and scaling, but they've lost that muscle of innovation, that ability to take a risk, to invest in the opaque, the unknown, right? And then set a vision where you're taking some chances and saying to other people, I don't really know, like I'm not sure. I think, but you know what? And this is the part where I always come back to is like, this is what I think, but I know together we're going to get somewhere good, right? Like I'm not so never say I got the right answers. I'm saying, like you said, we're headed north. I think we can all agree this is a better future, right? The Moses story, getting the Israelites out of Egypt, right? We're going to the land of milk and honey. That's good enough, right?
Let's hope we don't wander for 40 years. Let's make it like 2
Well,
or
if
3.
it's an IT project, it's probably going to go for at least 20 to 30. Yeah,
It might be 40. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So, Eric, we talked earlier about being lucky. So, curious who you've leveraged in your journey so far.
Oh, I think the honest answer is everybody, both who have said, no way, you're crazy, and those who've stood behind me. I think some really important things that, as an innovator, that I've leveraged is learning, at least for me, the best way to deliver tech, which is agile methodology, right? And there's the manifesto out there, and there's the handbooks, and there's the religion and the cult side of it, right? But a good common sense approach towards measuring, having accountability, setting good directives, good clear objectives for how you break your project down, and then sharing that with the team. It's the best way that I've ever seen in terms of how to get everyone to go north. And that was taught to me by a former CIO that we had, that I'm very appreciative for that. I think our customers, being honest with me, we mentioned earlier the feedback, and I tell them what we're thinking about, and they'll call me names, or positive or negative, right? But getting that feedback and having them believe, right, and saying, yeah, I'll try that out, and trying out some new tech on a several $100 million supply chain, right, because they believe in us, right, and we've built that trust. That's really rewarding, and that's a great feeling. And then, of course, I've had some board members along the way, who have really just wanted to give me good advice, whether it's, again, it's almost as much of what not to do as what to do, when to sit back and relax, even though you want to, jump out of your chair, when to be more aggressive, when you think you might want to sit and wait it out. And those are more life lessons on better ways to play poker, and just things that are valuable, that, I think, Patrick, to your point earlier, as you age, you learn a bit more about what's important and what's not, and to respect your elders, because they've seen a lot of things. And then overall, there's I think there's the team here, right? So I'd be remiss if not to say, having been here for so long, right? I'm not here because, the cookies and the condiments in the kitchen are amazing, right? It's because
It's nice that they are, though.
It's nice. I don't know how old they are now with the pandemic. They might be from 2019, but I think the bigger thing is that if you have an environment where it's safe to fail, even though, obviously get out of that rut as quickly as possible. But when people are behind you saying like, hey, you're going to try it out and you have a plan, let's try it. If it doesn't work, we'll obviously have to pivot, but let's do it. And finding that balance and having people that believe in you and also give you that honest feedback of like, you're crazy, right? Like, what are you thinking? That's really valuable. If everyone's smiling and giving you thumbs up, right? Like, you should find new friends. So I don't know. I guess that's my answer.
Well, I appreciate you coming on today. Obviously, I think we could go for another 3-4 hours. So hopefully we'll get you back again. We can catch up maybe next year, hear how things are going for you and for your team over there. But thanks so much for joining us today and sharing your experience and your contrarian view, asking for help, being humble, walking in other people's shoes, all really great lessons that I don't think a lot of people would expect to hear from a chief innovation officer, but I think it's absolutely the truth. And I think it's why you're successful.
I appreciate that.
So we also wanted to thank you, our listeners. We really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us today.
And if you'd like to receive new episodes as they're published, you can subscribe by visiting our website at dragonspears.com/podcast, or find us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode was sponsored by Dragon Spears and produced by Dante32.